Hi, everyone. Walt Rakowich here again. And as most of you know, I'm the former Chief Executive Officer of Prologis and the author of Transfluence, a book about the opportunity that we all have to make a transformative influence on the lives of those that we serve. I'm back again for another live chat with some of the most thoughtful voices, guiding leaders to be more human, to be more effective. And I'm joined today by someone who doesn't always speak directly to the business crowd, but who has an amazing story with incredible insights. I mean, she is Anita Moorjani, and her message is not only quite interesting, but extremely thought-provoking. And she's recognized throughout the world for her message. Let me just say a couple things. She had a near-death experience which changed her life, and she now lives to speak into the minds of other people. She's the author of 4 books. Her first book, Dying to Be Me, is a New York Times bestseller and has sold over 1 million copies in 45 languages. And she's also written If This Is Heaven, Love, a story about who you truly are, and Sensitive is the New Strong. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's in those books in a moment. Anita has been a featured guest on Dr. Oz show, Fox News, the Today Show, CNN's Anderson Cooper 360, and the National Geographic Channel. And her TED Talk has received over 3 million views. She's dedicated her life to empowering the minds and hearts of people with her story of courage and transformation. I think she's an amazing person. Anita, great to have you on live with us today.
Wow, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for that beautiful introduction.
Okay, Anita, I've just got to ask you one quick personal question before we get started. You freely admit in your book that your husband takes you down when it comes to housework. My wife wants to know if he gives lessons to other people. And in particular, she wants to know if he gives lessons to me.
That's hilarious. I love your wife already. So yes, it's so true that my husband is way better at housework than I am. And yeah, we even have some funny stories about that, but you've just given me a thought for another stream of income, renting my husband out to teach housework to men.
That's great. Well, I'll tell you one thing. He can, I would be his first client.
I'll tell him to sign you up right away.
Absolutely. All right, Anita. So, I just finished your book, Sensitive is the New Strong. And I was really struck in the book by how different we all are in this world. Sometimes I'm not cognizant of that, or as cognizant as I could be. The book really helped me to understand the importance of being sensitive to those around me who have differences in the way that we interact with everyone. You're a highly empathetic person, as you describe yourself. You label yourself as an empath in your book. I don't know if I say that right, because I had never really heard that term used the way that you used it. But can you tell us a little bit about what that means?
Sure. So I hadn't heard of the term empath until a few years ago, maybe 7, 8 years ago. And somebody once said to me, "Oh, you're an empath." And that's when I started to look it up. And the term was made or brought into popular culture by Dr. Elaine Aron and Dr. Judith Orlov, both of whom are psychologists. And they identified that there is a segment of our population who are not just empathetic by nature, but so they use the term empath, meaning you're not only aware of what other people are feeling, because basically, what is empathy? Empathy is an awareness of what the people around you are feeling. But being an empath means not only are you aware, but you literally take it on, or it's like you entrain or align your energy to match that of the people around you. So let me give you like a stark example. So let's say if you have somebody who's just highly sensitive and empathetic working in a hospital as a nurse, or even a first responder in in an emergency room or something. So someone who is has empathy, high empathy, will know exactly what the person going through the trauma needs at any moment. They'll be like, okay, I'm on it. I get it. This is what you're feeling. This is what you need. And so they react to it very, very well. But if somebody is an empath, which is one step further, an empath literally not only knows what you need, but feels it with you. It's like they feel the pain, they feel your emotions within their own body. And at the end of the day, they walk out of a day's work in an emergency room or as a hospital nurse or something, and they actually feel depleted. But somebody who just has empathy but is not an empath could walk away feeling really good about a good day's work done. Wow, I responded well to that. An empath will walk away having taken on the energies and the feelings of those people, and will actually walk away feeling tired, drained, and depleted, and they won't understand why. So this is kind of, I'm giving you an extreme case just to give you a contrast as to what it means. And most people who are empaths are walking around as empaths, taking on energies of other people and not even realizing they're doing this. And this is why I wanted to bring it to people's attention, that you might be an empath and maybe you don't even know it.
So in other words, you're taking on not only your own emotions, but someone else's emotions, or you're marrying the two together, and it's almost like double trouble.
Yes, yes, and in the
Double trouble, but
exact
double, yeah. Oh my gosh.
and the last couple of years of all the fear and of everything we've been going through since 2020, many empaths are actually feeling this, the anxiety of the people around them. However, at the same time, I know a lot of empaths have actually loved the lockdown. They've loved the fact that they're no longer obligated to be among people and see people. They've actually loved that solitude as well.
Okay, so I have to ask you a little different question as it relates to gender in this, because I had Sally Helgeson on this show about a year ago. I don't know if you know Sally, but she's authored 7 books on women and how they thrive in the workplace, and she's a tremendous speaker and the like. She mentioned to me in on the show that in her view, women actually have a better sense of those things that happen around them than men. And she said that women are like, quote unquote, radar. When they come into a room, they scan a room. They've got, far greater degree of situational awareness than men. And I'm going to tell you something. My wife is absolutely that way relative to me. And I'll be the first to admit. In fact, we talk about it all the time. Her nickname is Radar. And so I'm just kind of curious, do you think that there's an overall gender gap as it relates to empaths and just empathy in general?
Yes. So, as a generalization, I would say yes, I totally agree. And I think that nature intends it to be this way because women do have to nurture children and have to make sure that their children are safe, and so men do have to go out in, traditionally, not anymore, but in ancient times, men had to go out into danger and provide. Um, Whereas women had to have that nurturing quality over their babies. But I want to add that in modern society, there is something else, is that as a generalization, again, yes, women probably are more empathetic than men. But when you do have sensitive men or young boys who are sensitive, they are chastised for it. And that's an issue. Boys are told that boys don't cry and they're told to man up. Whereas I believe that our world needs more sensitivity. We have sidelined it. We see it as a weakness. And that's an issue. That's the real issue, is the fact that we don't identify sensitivity as a strength, but we actually see it as an issue. And we identify things like ruthlessness, brute force, competitiveness. We identify or we define those traits as being strong. and the traits of feeling for other people and empathy and compassion as or having a lot of it as a weakness. And when men are more that way inclined, they're ostracized, and so they suppress it. So I think that plays a lot into it too.
Just curious, do you think we as men, but people in general can improve at it?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it starts with learning from a young age. So I want to be clear here. What we're talking about here is empathy, and
Mm.
anybody can learn empathy. Being an empath is slightly different,
Yeah,
but an empath are not a majority of the population. They are in a minority. But
right.
empathy is definitely something that needs to be taught. It needs to be seen as a strength. As a culture, we need to redefine the metrics of what it means to be strong if we want to change what we see in the outer world, if we want to change what we see in our future leaders, if we want to change what we see in the way the world is being run. I mean, like, you look at the world today, our governments, our leaders, our biggest nations spend way more money on mass weapons to kill each other than they do on feeding each other. If everybody was fed and satisfied, and if you ask an empath to look at it, this is what they'll tell you. If everyone was fed and satisfied and everybody had what they wanted, we wouldn't have a need to kill each other. We wouldn't have wars. If you put empaths in leadership roles, in every leadership roles, you would heal all world hunger and all wars in 5 minutes. That's what I truly believe.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. Well, I'm glad you think we can improve at it, because we have to improve at it as a society.
Yes.
But what's
In
interesting to me is you actually say that you can be empathetic. And again, I'm not trying to confuse the word empaths, but empathetic and strong at the same time. You can be both.
Yes, you can. You absolutely can. So the way that empathy can be taught, let's just take an example, is that if you had, if you started with schools, if it became, if collaboration was rewarded more than competition. At the moment, competition is rewarded more, but
Right.
collaboration is not rewarded because everybody's worried about getting ahead of everyone else, because we're taught there isn't enough to go around, and we got to get into college, and we got to get ahead of everyone else to get into college. And we feel victorious when we win ahead of other people, without having empathy that, what about the guy who didn't get in, or the girl who didn't get in? What about the person who finished last? How do they feel? We don't empathize with them, and that's not taught or encouraged. So imagine if collaboration was rewarded. Imagine if there were actually exercises or projects in schools where kids were told that you have to go for 1 week in a wheelchair as though you're a paraplegic, and we want you to just live for a week as though you are paraplegic, and here's your wheelchair to take with you. And so how do you go to the bathroom? How do you get changed? How do you have a shower? Feel what it feels like. And you could give kids and teenagers different scenarios to try out, so they can actually empathize what other people feel like who are going through those things. And if you do that, if you had a school system that did that, you would have these brilliant kids who would know how to create technology to help people that are special needs, that are more needy than others.
Yeah, I could absolutely see that. So Anita, I've got to go backward a little bit.
Sure.
February 2nd, 2006, was supposed to be the last day of your life. Your physical body died that day, as you say, but your soul didn't. What happened on that day, and how did that change your life?
So I had end stage cancer. I had terminal cancer, and I was at end stage. And on February 2nd, I went into a coma. And at that point, my body was emaciated. My muscles had atrophied. I hadn't been able to walk for months because my muscles were atrophied. I'd weighed about 85 pounds. My lungs were filled with fluid. I would choke when I would lie flat. I had lymphoma that had metastasized and spread throughout my body. So I had tumors from the base of my skull all around my neck, under my arms, in my chest, all the way down to my abdomen.
Oh my gosh.
And so on that day, my organs shut down, and the doctors told my family that this was it. I was in my final hours, and I wasn't going to come back. I wasn't going to come out of the coma. But unbeknownst to everyone around me, even though my physical body was in a coma, um, I my soul was, it was literally like I had left my body, and my soul, my spirit felt amazing. So I had been in so much pain and so much discomfort and so much fear for all this time leading up to that point where my physical body was lying there dying in the hospital bed. But now that I left my body, I felt incredible. I actually felt alive, more alive than ever. And I felt free. Um, and I felt like something that I can only describe as unconditional love. And the word unconditional love is actually an oxymoron, because if love was if love was conditional, it wouldn't be love, it would be something else. Um, so what I felt was just this divine love, like I was bathed in it, enveloped in it, and it was mine. I didn't have to do anything to prove myself to be worthy of this. I was just loved just because I existed. And the first thought or feeling I had was, why did I not know this while I was physically alive in my body? Why did I always feel that I had to constantly work at being healthy and well? And why did I have to constantly feel I had to work at winning other people's approval? And and so it was just this huge revelation. Now that I was dying, I was learning all these things. um, and then I felt I was surrounded by loved ones who some of whom I had known in this life, many of them whom I didn't recognize from this life. But to kind of cut a long story short, because this story is a story unto itself, but I reached a point where I had a choice as to whether to come back into my physical body, or to continue on into death. And no part of me wanted to come back, because I had been suffering. My family was suffering taking care of me because I was so sick. But my deceased father, who I felt his spirit was there in the other realm, guiding me, and my best friend who had died of cancer 2 years prior, they were encouraging me to come back. And they wanted me to know that now that I knew these truths, that I was loved and I didn't have to seek approval. And I seemed to understand that that was why I had even got sick. And that's why I was lying there in that hospital bed dying, that every thought and decision and choice I had made in this life had led to that point of me dying in that hospital bed. And so they wanted me to know that now I had this understanding that if I went back into my physical body, that my body would heal, and it would heal very quickly. And so I made the choice to come back, and I could definitely feel my dad telling me, now that you know the truth, go back and live your life fearlessly. And I felt that's all I needed to do, was to go back and live my life fearlessly. And so once I made the decision to come back, I started to come out of the coma, and my family were around me, and the doctors were still saying that I was still critical, and they were telling my family, don't raise your hopes just because she's come out of the coma. But sure enough, in 4 or 5 days, my tumors shrunk by about 60%. In 3.5 weeks, they could hardly find any trace of cancer. In 5 weeks, they let me go home from the hospital. That was March 9th, 2006. They sent me home from the hospital to live my life cancer-free.
Amazing. And you mentioned your best friend, I assume Sony,
Yes,
who 5 years before that was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, and she
yes.
obviously eventually died from it. And you said in your book that it knocked the wind out of you, and it was almost as if you were given the same diagnosis as she was. This gets back to the empath thing that we were talking about, and that you had done everything you could to prevent it because you were worried you were going to get it too, and you did, notwithstanding all the stuff that happened you tried to not get it. And so, but your mind, so how important of a role do you think your mind plays in the outcomes of our lives?
Huge, like a really huge role. Our mind and our knowledge about ourselves and our evaluation of who we truly are. So I never felt I mattered before. And it's quite common with empaths, because when an empath feels what other people are feeling, an empath tends to downplay their own feelings and their own needs and their own emotions. And so this is why I kind of bring empaths, I bring awareness to empaths that you have a tendency to do this, that you tend to put other people first. So my friend Sony, and I can say this now, I had no idea that I was an empath, none whatsoever. I only discovered this term about 8 years ago. I knew I was sensitive. Everybody knew I was sensitive, but I didn't know I was absorbing the emotions and energies of the people around me. So let's go back to when Sony was diagnosed with cancer. She was diagnosed before me. And I can say this now, this is what I wanted to say, is that she was not an empath. Looking back now, I was always an empath. And I think some people just are, and probably 90% of the people just aren't. So, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing to be one or not be one. It just is, kind of like saying whether somebody has Asperger's or somebody, has, your eyesight is, whether they're colorblind or not. So it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but it's important to know, because if you don't know, then it's not a good thing. But when you know, you can turn it into a gift. So, so Sony had cancer, and Sony was not an empath. And Sony was also somebody who was a very strong personality, very strong, very, I want to say this without making it sound negative, because she was a beautiful person. I loved her. She was like a sister to me, but she knew how to, she wasn't afraid of making demands. Let's put it that way. She wasn't afraid of asking for what she needed. I was the opposite. I was the complete opposite. So having said that, I was there for her during her diagnosis, but every day I was feeling that the pain that she was going through. Now, here's the thing about being an empath. I was probably feeling more pain than what she was actually going through, because I was imagining me having the cancer. I was imagining me having something that was so aggressive, and I was imagining me with the fear. I suspect she wasn't even as fearful as I was. I literally was taking it on. And with an empath, what happens is your mind can be, our minds are so strong that as an empath, you have to kind of be careful what you take on. I literally took it on. And it started out with me being there for her and running around and doing everything I could to make her life better. Because as an empath, that's what you do. You feel what they're feeling, and you want to do everything you can to alleviate their pain. But the more I would do, the more I realized I couldn't alleviate her pain. And so I started to get worn down and drained. But I could not stop doing things for her, because that would make me feel guilty. Because I felt guilty that I had my health and she didn't. I hope this is making sense.
Yeah.
I actually felt guilty that I had my health and she didn't. And so I stopped valuing myself and my life, and kind of entrained myself to where I felt she was at. And what my own body did was, or my mind did, it gave me a reason to take care of myself. And this is an important thing that I want to tell people. You don't need an excuse or a reason to take care of yourself. You don't need to feel guilty about taking care of yourself, even when other people around you are suffering. I went through that. And so I needed something as big as what she had for me to then say, oh, now I got to take care of myself and meet my own needs. It took that for me to start listening to my own body. And in fact, even when I had cancer, I was still more worried about the people who were helping me and still more worried about how they were feeling and putting them out, that I would say, no, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about me. And it actually didn't even take getting cancer to realize that I needed to put myself first. It took death for me to realize that. And it was only in death did I realize, oh, wow, my soul is, matters. I matter. I need to take care of myself, and I don't need an illness as a reason or an excuse. I matter. Even if people around me are sick and dying, I have to be aware that if I'm going to feel guilty they're dying, if I'm going to be being a doormat and serving them and running myself down, it's not going to serve anybody. I need to put myself first and be healthy if I want to be out there for other people. So, yeah.
So your mindset matters. It's really interesting. If you look back, do you believe, I mean, I know you don't know for sure, maybe you do, but do you believe that because your mind was so much on her that actually you got cancer as a result of that?
I actually do, and I'm gonna expand on that a little bit, because I want to first say that it was not her fault. It was because of the
Right.
way my mind was working. So
Right.
that's number one. The second thing I want to say is that I was already somebody who was a doormat, who was a people pleaser, who always put everybody else ahead of myself. And then the third thing I want to say is that everything I did, every decision I made, came from a place of fear and not from a place of a love or joy for myself or for my life. And so, to give you a clear example of that, when I saw her, so this is another aspect of it. When I saw her going through what she was going through, and I was there for her and put myself last, but also I feared the illness. I feared it so much that I wanted to do everything I could do to avoid cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would research everything that was anti-cancer. So I started going on an anti-cancer diet. I started taking all the supplements that had antioxidants that were anti-cancer. I started doing wheatgrass juice shots. And I did all of this from a fear of cancer. So where was my focus? My focus was on cancer, and my focus was on fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing everything every day from this place of fear. And what happened? I got cancer. What I tell people is you need to love yourself. You need to love your life. You need to find joy in your life. You need to laugh and then do everything you do. You can choose to be healthy, but you can choose it from a place of loving your life and wanting to live longer, not from a place of fear of disease, fear of illness. That's the wrong reason. And that is the wrong focus. Because where is your focus? When you're focused on anti-cancer, it's still on cancer. Your focus has to be on life, on love, on joy, on passion. What am I passionate about? What do I want to do here? What has my soul come here to be? Allow your soul to express itself and be all that it came here to be.
So I'd like to explore that fear a little bit, because I talk about fear in my book. I think it's a major problem. You talk about it. You go on in detail about it. You talk about filters and opinions that we have on human beings on things that hold us back. And you say that many of our filters are quote unquote fear-based,
Yes.
causing us to believe, in your case, we aren't good enough. And actually, in my case, that's the imposter theory or whatever that is rings loud and true, I think, for a lot of us, including me. I think fear is one of the biggest problems that leaders have in business. I think
Yes.
fear causes them to do a lot of really bad things or dumb things in some respects. And so can you talk just a little bit more about that? Because from a business person's perspective, I really think it's one of the greatest sins that we can create. And somehow we got to get over that. How do you get
We
over?
do. So it is huge. The first thing is, as an individual, as individuals, we need to see through it. We need to see how we have been conditioned. And I often call this our marinade. What have we been marinated in from the time we were young, from the time we were children? And when you look at our education system, totally founded on fear. Fear of not being good enough, fear of not passing the test, fear of not getting into the right college, fear of being behind the other kids, fear of not getting ahead. Competition is rooted and steeped in fear, fear of not coming last, fear of being shamed, fear of being ridiculed. Um, so so if you look at the way we've been conditioned and brought up, starting from our education system, it's all fear-based. Then let's move to our medical system. Our medical system is not a healthcare system. It's an illness scare system. What does that tell you? Fear-based. The entire, even the wellness centers and the prevention, all they do is go in and look for disease. Nobody tells you or teaches you, what does wellness look like? What does it feel like? What should you do to stay well? No one tells you that that joy and spirituality and peace and calm and all of these things are part of wellness. All they teach you is look for diabetes, look for heart disease, look for cancer. You don't have them? Okay, you're fine. Off you go. But the focus is still always on illness. That makes it a fear-based system, an illness scare system. Take our governments. What do? Do they foster collaboration? No, it's always about creating an enemy. Always, whatever the enemy is, there's always an enemy. So you look at our entire paradigm, and it is also, I'm going to say this, I'm probably going to be criticized for saying this, it is also not a coincidence that most of our leaders are men and not women. Women are wired more for collaboration and empathy and nurturing, and less for competition than men. So I just had to say that.
No, that's okay, and it makes total sense. I think about my biggest fear, and I talk about it in the book. My biggest fear has always been failure. I mean,
Yeah.
and
But
yet I think we all need to fail in order to succeed.
I was just going to say that failure is a good thing. It
Yeah,
gives you
absolutely.
humility. It gives you compassion. It really does. Everybody needs to fail. It's really easy being a good winner, but I mean, um, it's really easy to be joyful and all when you win. But we talk about sore losers. That's because people aren't encouraged to fail. We need to fail. We need to learn how to fail more. We really do.
And have it be okay.
And have it be okay.
Be
The
okay.
problem is failure is shamed. And this is where the fear stems from.
Right.
And we should stop shaming failure. We really should.
All right. So when I read your book, I have to tell you that I took the quiz in chapter 1. And the quiz was on, what's my empathy level? If I said that the right way, I don't know if I exactly did, but anyway, it turns out that I am partially empathetic or
You're partial. Yeah.
empathic. Am I right? Yes. I have
Yes.
partial empathic leanings, which is not exactly the high level of the spectrum, but it's sort of okay. You kind of partially pass the mustard, Walt. So just looking at myself, I find that empathy is something I can kind of work towards, but it doesn't always come naturally to me. And in fact, I wrote a chapter. I wrote an add-on chapter to Transfluence which speaks to the importance of leaders needing to have more empathy. But I also talk about the fact that it's hard. Sometimes it's hard for me. I'll be honest. And do you think I'm unusual in that?
Nope. Nope. I think that most people are like you. I don't think you're unusual. I think it's quite normal. I'll tell you where the issue comes in, and this is not your issue. You're normal. You're fine. The issue is with the people who have high empathy, the empaths in the world. The people who are empaths, highly sensitive, and have high empathy, they avoid leadership roles. And that's where we have the issue in, I believe, in the world. So when you have people who have, average empathy, like say just the majority of the people, they have average empathy, that's fine. So one of the issues is that when you have average empathy, the rest can be learned to make you more empathic. But when you have a world where leadership, most of the leadership roles, and this is not you, but most of the leadership roles are held by people with low empathy. And we can tell this. And why do I say this, that most of the leadership roles are held by people with low empathy? It's because when you look at the world around us, when you look at everything from pharmaceuticals and the whole medical paradigm, it's not run with empathy. It's all run with dollars in mind. When you look at government systems, is that run with empathy? No. It's run with competitiveness and power in mind. When you look at the education system, is it run with empathy? No. Kids are not taught empathy. In fact, it's shamed. Losing is shamed. You got to get ahead. You look at all the major systems and you can tell we do not have enough empath leaders in place. And so the problem here is that the world is run by people who are at the lowest end of the empath scale. And that is why that is why, and one of the things that I mention in the title of my book is about living in a harsh world. And this is why for an empath, so someone who's at the other end of the scale, an empath, the world feels really harsh. It feels as though the world was not made for us. So the first thing is to be able to see this, and then to question, why are there no empaths, people on that end of the scale, in leadership roles? And that's because empaths hide, because we feel the world is harsh and we feel the world is not made for us. And so we hide and we take a back seat and we hide in the shadows. But what I encourage empaths and highly sensitive people to do is to actually go out there and show people, this is who I am, this is who my soul intended me to be, and it's for a reason. It's for a reason, and I need to encourage other people who are like me to give it a voice and to speak out and to take on more leadership roles. And so this is how we can start to make the change. Everyone else who's in the middle, it's like a bell curve, like the population. So everyone else who's in the middle, they're fine. They will learn whichever way it goes. And if suddenly more empathy is taught in schools, all the people who have middle average empathy will all learn to fill in the gaps. But if right now the system is more geared towards competitiveness, ruthlessness, and all the things that are at that end of the scale, that is where all the people in the middle will kind of move. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. In many respects, I think maybe the market is beginning to appreciate more and more, although it may not seem like it, but more and more the value of having empathetic leaders. You're hearing more and more discussion about it. Obviously, I'm talking more about it. There's a lot of people out there, but we've got a lot of stress and we got a lot of mental health challenges in the workplace today. A lot.
Yes.
And COVID has brought some of that on, of course, but I think it was frankly, I think it was happening pre-COVID as well. Just COVID exacerbated it, accelerated it. And you outline in your book many ways of kind of getting your mind in the right place. And I know there's a lot of them. So, and we don't have a ton of time, but I'm kind of curious. Can you summarize some of those suggestions that you might have for people as solutions, perhaps to begin to get them to where they need to get in that regard?
Sure. So some of the things that I strongly suggest to people is that you really need to take some time out for yourself every single day. And often busy people will say to me, "But I can't. I've got a job, or I've got 3 jobs, or I've got a job and kids, and blah blah blah." But the thing is that I say to them that this is as important, if not more important, than your job and your kids and everything else. So that's the first thing I tell people, is to realize that you do need to take 20 or 30 or 40 minutes, however long you can, every day to do something for yourself. You really do. And it is a matter of survival, because if you don't, and you are living a fear-based life with a couple of jobs, whether you're fearing, your health or finances or whatever, it doesn't matter. But if you're leading a fear-based life with no time for yourself, and you're stressed and all of that, and you don't take time out for yourself, and you don't see the value of it, then you cannot keep going the way you're going. Something's going to give. So before that something gives, I tell people the number one thing is to realize that this is super important. If that describes you, that you are running on adrenaline and you're living a fear-based life. So once you become aware of that, carve out whatever length of time you can and do something that brings you peace, calm, pleasure. And it could be anything. And do not feel guilty, even if you have kids waiting for you, a spouse, a job, whatever. Do not feel guilty. And it could be anything from meditating, soaking in a hot bath, going to see a movie that you've wanted to see. It could be going for a walk, sitting in nature, sitting on the beach, looking at the ocean, anything. But here's the thing. The other piece that I want to say, and this is going to sound a little bit woo-woo, but I'm going to say it anyway. Because of my experience on the other side, I know we are all connected. We are not just physical bodies. We have a soul that is expressing itself through us. And we are connected to this soul. I mean, the soul is us, not even connected. The soul is us, and it's much greater than our physical bodies. This soul is trying to express itself through you. But you, the physical you, has free will. And if you are in stress and fear all the time, the soul or your higher self actually has trouble coming through or communicating with you or letting you know who you're supposed to be. It cannot get its messages through. It cannot. It's only in those times of peace. It's only in those times when you're walking on the beach, or you're listening to music, or you're soaking in the tub, or doing those kinds of things, can it actually express itself through you. And it's only in those times, by allowing those times, can you actually eventually even get out of a situation that you're in. That, like, say you could be in a job you hate, but you think, there's no way I can get out of it. I need to put food on the table and pay my bills. And so you're go, 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 go. The only way to even figure out a way out of whatever you're in is to give yourself that time. And that is the only way. And that is the time that your higher self uses to communicate through you and to work through you.
Anita, are you intentional about that every day?
I am. I speak to my higher self all the time, every day. And here's the way I view life. I don't see, like for some people, spirituality, religion, whatever, is external. They kind of pray to an external god, or they're not religious or spiritual at all. For me, it's internal. I allow spirit or my soul to work through me. Mm-hmm. And so I am soul or spirit expressing itself through this body. And in order to express itself, I need to give myself that space and that time to allow it to come through me and tell me, okay, this is what I want, what I need to do next. And this is where the direction I need to go.
You're intentional about letting it soak in.
Yes, I
I love
am.
that. I am too, just so you know. My last question for you, and it's been great. But what are you most grateful for in your life? Obviously, you had an experience that none of us, 99.99% of us will never have. but I mean, what are you most grateful for in your life now?
Interestingly, I'm more grateful for it's all the little things. I'm really grateful to have been given a second chance at life. And I'm super grateful more than anything else um, for my relationships. That's the most important thing. For me, I have a very, very strong bond with my husband, Danny. And if I didn't have people to share this journey with, this journey would not be worth anything to me. So relationships to me are the biggest and most important thing, and that's what I'm most grateful for more than anything. And I am super grateful just for the opportunity to share my message and to touch people, and for everything that I'm doing right now. I love what I do today. I love how my life is unfolded.
Well, I have to tell you, that's a great ending to say that we're really grateful that you were on. I'm personally grateful that you're on, spending this 45 minutes with us. It's just been terrific. And I'd like to thank you so much for giving us your time. And I'd like to thank everybody that is on right now. And a lot of people these days don't even watch live. They watch the video down the road. So everybody watching later on, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Anita and her work, you can check out her website at anitamoorjani.com. Of course, you're going to find a little bit more about me and Transfluence at waltrakowich.com. And I'd also like to encourage everybody to keep an eye out for future live streams. We've got, terrific people on, and man, I tell you what, I learn a lot every time we do one of these. And so until then, I just like to encourage you to have a positive influence on those around you each and every day. And Anita, thank you so much again for being on. It was just terrific to have you.
Thank you so much. You asked amazing questions. This was so much fun, and the time just flew by.
Thank you. All right, everybody, we're going to tune off. Thanks.